You need some more Raised on D&D but can't wait the whole month? Don't worry, we've got you covered. Here's your mid-month short. Welcome back to Raised on D&D. I'm your host, Nick Cardarelli, and my next guest is from Pennsylvania. He's the organizer of Dungeons & Dragons role-playing games with Kids and Family Facebook group. He has an upcoming Kickstarter he's working on. Please welcome Brandon Traynor. Hi, Brandon.
Hey, Nick. Thanks for having me, man.
Oh, thanks for being on the show. Listen, I have to be honest with you. I invited you on the show primarily because your Facebook group was kind of the inspiration for my podcast. I always played role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games, Dungeons & Dragons with my children all through their lives and raised them on D&D. But being part of your group and seeing that your group started in June of this year, is that right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
How many members are you up to now?
About 2,400.
2,400, and usually those represent families. I know there's a couple of spouses on there, like my wife and I are both members of the group.
Right.
But I think that I think it's safe to say you have easily over 2,000 families on.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So that's really incredible. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about the group because you're the organizer and the and kind of the moderator, right?
Yeah. I do it all.
All right. So is there, for people who are listening and they like being part of Facebook groups, I hope they become a part of your Facebook group. But as the coordinator, as the moderator, is there any particular challenges when it comes to kind of coordinating 2,400 families of gamers?
Yeah, it definitely does have its challenges. Thankfully, though, I do have the time to spend on it, and I'm kind of always available because I work from home and on the internet. So I can kind of keep tabs on it more so than, what you would working a more traditional job from 9 to 5. Probably, so some of the challenges is one, keeping spam out of the group. That's tough. Just having businesses join or kind of fake profiles joining and posting stuff. The other part too is there's a lot of really creative people in the group, and they make cool stuff, and they want to share it with people, and they want to be compensated. So they want to sell what they're making, and a lot of it's really cool. But I don't want the group to just become a huge advertising platform.
Right.
So kind of what I've done, or at least this is where it's at right now, is anybody who wants to promote themselves or sell something in the group, I want them to send it to me first so I can, check it out, kind of quality control it a little bit. And then, do maybe once a month, have like a giveaway video, do some silly contest, and can give it out for free that way, just as kind of like a buffer so people aren't getting hit with advertisements all the time and spam.
Absolutely. Because the group is really about showing that these gaming families, one, aren't alone. And I myself have gotten some fantastic ideas from other gaming families on your group.
Oh man, I've learned so much. It's been great.
Oh, the throwing dice on the poster board and creating your own map. I've always
so cool.
loved that. That was like hours of fun. Well, what are some of the cool things that you've taken away from the group already in just these last couple of months that you've kind of been able to apply at home?
Oh man, just a lot of the tips that people give, and kind of how they. What I like especially is how people incorporate learning and like homeschooling into their D&D campaigns. And a couple people were doing, they might time travel in their campaign, and it might go back to whatever time period they're studying in their schooling at that time, and kind of making learning fun, So I never even thought to do that. What a great idea.
And how many children do you guys have?
Just one daughter right now.
Oh, okay. And how old is she?
She just turned 5 last week.
Okay. All right. So just starting off, gaming with mine. Mine are all stair steps, 17 months apart. And so we were having them at the table, and I was just reading a Facebook memory the other day about how they were learning to recognize numbers off the D20 by playing the game, things like that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Your daughter's 5. Do you guys play like 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons? Are you using like a children's RPG, like some of the other things that are out there, like Hero Kids, things like that?
So she had her first, I guess, traditional Dungeons and Dragons campaign when she was about turned 4, and that was 5th edition. And I modified and simplified the rules a little bit, but that's always kind of been my play style anyway. I like more of the like role playing and less on the technical side, just kind of storytelling, having fun, and keeping it moving as much as possible. But I really think it started before that, which made me really consider even bringing D&D into my household, was just telling her stories, like bedtime stories whenever she was real little. And I'd have to think of a new one every night, so it really like stretched my creativity. And that kind of evolved into, sometimes I'd get stuck and I'd be like, well, Rowan, what happens next? Or what do you think they would do? And so then it kind of became a collective storytelling organically, through my lack of creativity early on.
well, mine would want their favorite characters from other franchises in the stories. So we would have like the Scooby Gang with the bridge crew of the original Star Trek Enterprise.
That's awesome.
And then the same thing. I would be like, well, what happens next? And they would have to come up with stuff to help me through it. So so that's great though. That's where it kind of starts, right? At that bedtime story. And
it really does, like
table.
And I feel like, I've told her all these stories and she's getting bedtime stories, but it was making me more creative at the same time too, like really, really challenging me on a nightly basis, because I would, I'd be walking around during the daytime thinking like, what am I going to tell for this story tonight? And trying to think of something really cool, and even the ones that we don't think are cool, the kids still love, Yeah. That's something to remember too. I know a lot of people get really nervous about the first time they're DMing for their kids. One, your kids already love you. Like they enjoy hanging out with you, like you don't have to be the greatest storyteller in the world. Like,
right.
They're going to have fun, like even if you think you didn't do a great job, like they're still going to have a blast with it. You're not with strangers who are judging you. This is your family who loves you anyway. And you're just hanging out, having a good time.
Yep. And also everything's new. Everything's new. The goblin bandits attacking the farm is maybe, old hat for us. But for them, it's, oh my goodness, goblins are attacking a farm. We have to do something.
Yeah, I love the early adventures, early level D&D, especially with new people that haven't joined, just getting them introduced to characters they're kind of familiar with, like goblins and just these real simple things. You're hanging out in the tavern and woman runs in and goblins stole her kid or they stole her dog. It's like very simple things. Like they just have a blast with. They think it's awesome.
They love it. And so let me ask you this. What's your background with role-playing games? So how old were you when you started gaming yourself?
So I probably didn't get into role-playing games until I was maybe in my early teens, maybe 13 or 14.
Okay.
Like my family didn't play, my parents didn't play. I remember, we would hang out at King's. It's a restaurant that used to be open 24 hours, and there wasn't much to do in our town, so we would get somebody's parents to drop us off there, and we would hang out and drink Mountain Dew, all night. And eventually we saw these slightly older teenagers, like they were playing Dungeons and Dragons in the corner there, and we kind of walked over and started talking. And so we used to play at the restaurant there. Like they gave us our own little room in the back eventually. So it was it, I didn't start playing D&D like how my daughter started. I had the more traditional, like,
Yeah.
hide away in the basement because people are going to make fun of you. And it wasn't really as accepted back then like it
No,
is now.
no. In fact, I like to tell the story how over the summer, I only get together with my grown-up group a couple of times a year. And I went to the print shop to print out character sheets because I wanted them real nice because we had new people. And when new people are playing, I'm introducing the game, I like to give them a set of dice and a pristine printed out color with the picture of their character on a character sheet. And I like to tell people how the girl behind the counter is like, "What is this?" And for a second, I was like, you're gonna say, "Oh, it's a board game," right? And I was like, "Wait a second, it's 2019."
Yeah.
I looked at her and I said, "This is Dungeons and Dragons," and she goes, "Oh, I always wanted to try that." But
it's on Stranger Things. That's cool now.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. You get a much better response than you used to.
When we were kids, we would never have said that to the print shop.
Oh, no.
No.
No, definitely.
So you started playing in your early teens. So do you remember your first gaming experience there at King's in the restaurant with the older teenagers?
I do. And it was very much different than than how I play now. This was in the back room at King's. Everybody's just drinking Mountain Dew, chain smoking in the back. And it was just it was almost like a secret club. It was very, very different, and everyone took it very, very seriously. And it's kind of a more lighthearted game that we play now.
Right.
But I like whenever you were saying that whenever you introduce new people, you like to print out the character sheet and make it colorful, because that's also a big difference in how I game now as opposed to back then. When I was younger, it was much more theater of the mind, just describing everything. But now I like myself, but especially playing with kids, making everything as visual as possible, so having the map laid out on the table and, as nice as it can be. And everybody has their own character, you paint them. And while that makes it, cool and engaging for the kids to play with because it's more visual, it's also a fun hobby to do outside of gaming, to sit and, paint your miniatures, with your daughter, or design a map or something. I feel like it makes them care about it more because now they have like a physical object that they can take ownership over, and they get more invested in a character that way.
Oh, absolutely. Getting to paint a miniature, whatever colors they want. I remember when I first introduced them to miniature painting, and the youngest, he painted wild colors, green cape, red helmet, all this stuff, but he loved that miniature.
Yeah.
And that was important. So there's a lot of, we were talking about homeschooling earlier and how there's a lot of lessons that can be learned through the engagement of role-playing games. And I'm sure growing up that, role-playing games for me made me want to read more about history. Like, how does a castle work? How does a catapult work? How heavy is full plate armor? Things like that.
Yeah.
And so it really does engage you and stimulate that learning. But what kind of life lessons are you hoping that your daughter can kind of take away from getting to role play with you those scenarios?
Well, while I see it as a great tool that can help learning, and very early on with math, and you're using a lot more vocabulary than you would normally hear outside of the game. So it's going to help as a tool for learning those things. But what I most want her to take out of it, and that I think I've taken over the years and that I treasure most, is the time spent playing with people that you care about and hanging out with them, and the memories you make together, and the bonds that you form, whether it's your friends or your family, really getting to physically hang out together and not, over the internet whenever that's possible. Just the relationship and memories, because, people are the things that are going to last, and you're going to remember those times and kind of just grow in that relationship.
Absolutely. And mine are much older now, but they may not remember every single game session. They may not remember every character or adventure, but what they remember is that time spent. What were some of the things that you were able to take from D&D, apply to your adulthood that kind of gave you an edge over maybe the people that you knew didn't play games like that?
Yeah. So one thing I think it did is, playing so much D&D, you're always trying to figure out a puzzle or there's a problem. And a lot of times, whether it's with magic or just in how you approach the problem, you really have to start thinking outside the box and really getting away from all the normal ways to open the door. And you have to really stretch your mind. And I own my own company and run my own business, and being able to kind of think outside the box and what aren't people trying right now? Like, what can I try that everybody else isn't? I think that's it's really helped me in business.
And that's fantastic. You were mentioning the bonds that we kind of create when it comes to the people we game with. And one of the things that I always enjoy, and I think a proud moment for me, was when my children as siblings started to mention inside jokes that had happened in the game, right?
Yeah.
And someone made a comment and they brought up pancakes and everybody started laughing, and it had something to do with an adventure that we had been in. And and you felt that camaraderie. So have you guys gotten to that point yet where there's little inside jokes, little things that you guys talk about that only happen in sessions and nobody knows what you're talking about?
One thing that kind of stands out for me is the very first actual D&D game I played with my daughter. We were in a tavern, and a bunch of giant rats came out of the cellar, and we had to fight those off. Like, that's how we opened up the campaign. And in doing so, one of the rats bit my character on the leg, and we fought off the rats. And later on, whenever we weren't playing, my daughter came up to me like real concerned, like, "Daddy, how are you feeling?" I'm like, "I'm okay, thanks." And then later on, again, she came out. She's like, "Is your leg okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, my legs are." She's like, "Oh, I don't know, that rat. It looked like it bit it really hard." And then then after that, that's kind of like a running joke. She'll ask me how the rat bite's doing.
That's wonderful. You're going to be working on a Kickstarter. It's going to be D&D related, but you can't tell us about it this episode.
That's correct. I can't even say it's D&D related for like intellectual property reasons.
Gotcha.
But
we'll say tabletop role playing.
Tabletop role playing related. Yeah, my background's in manufacturing, and I'm trying to work on something that's a visual aid to the game that's going to help new players and kids. And while I have a very strong background in manufacturing and producing products, working with artists is a whole new thing for me. So I have a lot of artwork that needs done, and it's more challenging than what I thought it was going to be.
All right.
But
well, I can't.
One thing.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it was making me think. One thing I wanted to mention is that in the group, you start to think, you see all these pictures of people playing, but what you got to remember, there's still people in that group that haven't played their first game yet, and they're listening to our stories and how we're playing, and kind of building up the courage to do it. And I've gotten a couple messages that were like, I just ran my first campaign, my first campaign with my kids, and I really didn't think I could do it. I was really nervous about it, but I read all the tips in the group, and took people's advice, and it turns out awesome, and everyone had such a good time. And when I hear something like that, it's, it's not just like a Facebook group where we're hanging out, having a good time. It's also helping people, and it's making their lives better, in their real life with their families. So whenever I get messages like that, I'm like, man, I'm really glad this group is here, because it brings me a lot of enjoyment too.
I'm so glad you started the group, because when I was talking about doing a podcast, I was looking at all the different topics that I could cover, and your group really was what kind of inspired it, because I said, what are the two things that are really important to me outside of work? And that was gaming and family. And I saw those posts from people who were like, we're pregnant with our first kid, and I'm kind of watching to see when I can introduce them and things like that. And then I saw the ones where families were saying, we've always wanted to try this. And families, what surprised me about your group is families who don't have a background in D&D, in tabletop role-playing games. Like, we've got people in the group that they're not like you and me. They didn't start playing when they were 12. They maybe saw it on Stranger Things or Big Bang Theory or something like that. And now they're like, oh, I want to try this, and I want to try it with my kids. And that was very surprising to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And even more so, and I give these parents like the biggest props in the world, is them having really no interest in D&D and gaming at all, but their kids, in school, they have like D&D clubs now, which just blows my mind. That's amazing that there's a D&D club at school. Like it's cool enough to do that, but maybe their kid joined the D&D club in school and, was looking at it, and now these parents are learning the game so they can play with their kids, and just doing that and learning for that sake when you weren't even interested in it beforehand. Because I don't want to say like we're pushing this on, our kids, but it's something that we love, that, we're actively pursuing, trying to introduce it to them. These people just, their kids saw it outside the home, and they're trying to, encourage that and encourage the things that they like. And it's a lot to learn, so I give those people a lot of credit.
Oh, absolutely. Have you guys incorporated extended family or neighborhood kids into it yet, or anything like that?
Yeah, so usually it's just us, because it's easy, we're all in the same house together. It's whenever we want to play. But yeah, occasionally I have nieces and nephews, and they'll see all the little miniatures set up around the house, and they'll ask about it, and my daughter will be like, oh, we killed this goblin yesterday and it was amazing. And they're like, what are you doing? And they're a little bit older than her, maybe like between like 8 and 12. So we've introduced them to like a few, like one-offs where they would just come in. I'd have a character all ready for them, and I'd keep track of most of the numbers, and they just kind of played along, and that's been really fun.
You mentioned a little more emphasis on the role play. Now, with mine, when they were little, they wanted non-combat resolutions, and I kind of talked about that in the group. They wanted to convince the Lich of his evil ways, and convince him to come to a picnic with them and not be bad anymore. So what were some of the things that you've done, though, to adjust it, make it more accessible to her?
So yeah, I try to keep it more simple, which basically means, I have her character sheet, like a copy of it in front of me also, and I'm keeping track of kind of all the numbers. I just give her the dice to roll, because kids like rolling dice. Everyone likes rolling dice. I don't care if you're an adult or you're a kid. Everybody just wants to roll some dice, So I try to, keep track of items. I don't have her, try to add it to her inventory or anything like that. I try to keep track of as much as I can myself, and really just have them, explain what they're doing and roll some dice sometimes. I find it can be that simple. And you can, fifth edition is such a nice system to learn on because it's pretty simple in and of itself, but you can also just add and subtract whatever rules that you want for your house and your family. And if they ever want to do something and I don't know the specific rule for it, I just make something up because it's not worth looking up in the rule book. You can do that afterwards and change it for next time, but just make it up. Keep the game going. Keep the pace up, because that's kind of what kills games is getting too bogged down in rules. I've played with adults like that. The main advice I would give is to make it as visually appealing as possible. So, that means, the miniatures and, making maps. Like, you don't have to spend a bunch of money on stuff. Like, you can just draw on cardboard, but try to make things as visually appealing as possible. Something I like doing for young kids is, if they get like a magic ring or a bracelet or something, like I have like some, costume jewelry, and I'll give them the ring and they can wear it, so that, like, as much interaction as possible. I saw somebody else who they were doing like a science experiment and making the potions that they were going to be using in game with their kids beforehand, as part of a science experiment. I was like, oh, that's awesome.
I think they were using like soda and all and Kool-Aid,
yeah,
and everything. And I saw that and I was like, oh, we got to do that. We got to try that.
Yeah, it's such a good idea. So yeah, anything that you can do for young kids to make it more visual, more hands-on. And the other thing, like, is just be into it. Like, we talk in front of adults and we, kind of keep ourselves reserved and hold back. But like, your kids aren't going to think you're goofy if you stand up and start, shouting and waving your arms around. They're going to think this is awesome. Just like really just go after it, because you're not going to look stupid to your kids. Like they're going to think it's a great time. Only as adults do we really worry about keeping ourselves reserved and not embarrassing ourselves.
Yeah, and I think trying out voices is a great
to
do it with kids.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, you can try out those voices, and like you mentioned earlier, these are your family, these are your children. They already love you. They're not judging you, and it's not an embarrassing thing. You can be goofy and you can make funny voices, and they'll just love it. They'll appreciate it.
I love doing the funny voices. It's like my favorite part.
Yeah. It's just great. Brandon, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. I hope to have you on the show again. I can't wait to have you back on when you start your Kickstarter.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I really hope that the listeners will check out the Dungeons and Dragons role-playing games with kids and family Facebook group, and they'll become part of that community, and they'll be encouraged and inspired to start playing with their kids. Thanks for listening to this month's Raised on D&D, the podcast about family and gaming. Be sure to like our page at www.facebook.com/Raised on D&D podcast, where you can find exclusive content, transcripts of the episode, and links to the resources that we discussed. As always, happy gaming.